If I tell you that I'm a fisherman, I have no doubt that you will think any story I am wanting to tell you must be some kind of giant fish. Well, there was a fish involved, but not in the way you likely think. So when I say I am a fisherman, I don't mean on the sea, or even as a job. I mean that I am retired from a very high-powered position, and my wife now likes to spend her time doing charitable stuff and lunching with the ladies. I enjoy finding remote spots to go fishing. I have a couple of favorite spots that I had time and time again to go to. Living up in Maine, I tend to fish during the warmer months, as there's no point trying to find somewhere that isn't exactly frozen during the cooler time of the year. I know to be aware of bears, but the most scared I'd been up until now was when a nosy moose wandered over like some kind of ninja. He didn't do nothing. He just shot warm air down the back of my neck. But the thing I'd like to tell you about did not sneak up on me. I was sat on the side of the lake, enjoying the quiet and taking a gulp of a nice hot cup of coffee from my thermos. The line began moving, so I knew I had a catch. Just as I began to reel it in, something swooped down from the sky, seemingly out of nowhere, and tried taking the fish. Of course, since it was attached to a hook in my line, it didn't come away easy, so whilst it battled with the fish, I was able to get a pretty good look at it. It wasn't exactly huge, around the size of maybe a large beaver, I would think, and that was what it mainly looked like. A furry brown beaver, except for different things. It had a snout, kind of like that of a horse, or maybe a bird of prey. It's hard to exactly explain. It was also curved, and it had weird wings. They weren't exactly feathery, though I'm not sure how much of a difference that would make. It appeared more bat-like than it did bird-like. Even in the short time I had my sight, I could clearly see little veins sticking out. Finally, it managed to rip the fish off the hook, using a strange sort of snout beak that I can now see had talons at the end of its beaver-like paws. This beaver bird bat thing took its prize and flew off. I don't think it even looked at me. It didn't seem to care that I was even there, and it showed practically no fear, but also no malice. Part of me even wondered if it was blind, and it simply hadn't seen me, that it had heard the fish flapping and made a dive for it. I can say certainly, it was a very strange experience, and I've never in my life imagined giant fruit-like bat creatures living up here in Maine. A few years back, I was camping when something really weird and messed up happened. I was on my own, and I could hear this weird scratching and flapping noise coming from just outside my tent. Camping in the middle of the woods, though, you expect animal noise. I mean, I had stuck a tent right in the middle of their house. As long as I wasn't hearing growling or howling or any other animal noise, I was pretty sure that I would be okay. And since it was coming from the top of the tent, I could hear the flapping. I guessed that it must have been some sort of bird. Again, not exactly a shocker, and hardly likely to cause me any harm. The next sound I heard, however, certainly gave me pause. It sounded like a woman singing. Now again, hearing another human isn't exactly the strangest thing that can happen, aside from the fact that it was in the middle of the night, and there was nobody else around. I wasn't camped in a site. This was just me pitching up a tent in the woods. I had not seen another person the entire day, and the woods were in the middle of nowhere. There were no houses nearby, and since it was around 3 a.m., she couldn't have been walking a dog or a pet. Although at that point, I was curious. I still wasn't about to go out of the tent into the freezing cold of the night. The woman, whatever reason she was out there, was singing, not screaming or shouting for help. The scratching and flapping above me became more frantic, and at that point, I had put my hand up against the tent and called out to her, hoping to shoo the bird away. The last thing I needed was it making holes in my tent. That was when it suddenly occurred to me that the singing also seemed to be coming from above the tent, and seemed to somehow coincide with the intense flapping sound. I still wasn't afraid yet. More like, what is going on, and how can I make it go away? So I grabbed my flashlight and fleece, unzipped the tent, shining my light toward the top, and I finally saw what was making the noise, although I can't really explain it. It shouldn't have been there, because it shouldn't have existed. I screamed and fell over, landing on my backside, but I managed to keep hold of the flashlight. The light closely trained on this abomination, now perched on the very top of my tent. Looking back at it, it frightens me just to think about, and even to write this out to you. But I am able to make a very poor comparison. Alright, have you ever seen that Treehouse of Horror Simpsons episode, where the Poe's the Raven, and Bart appears as the Raven? You could see it's Bart, but it also looks like a bird. It kind of looked like that. Not really like a cartoon Bart, but it kind of looked half human, half raven. The face looked more female than anything else, and it seemed to have thick, feathery body and wings. A rather large set of wings, by the way, which at this point were still rapidly flapping, even though she, or it, the thing, was still atop the tent. But then, instead of a very bird-like face with beady eyes and a beak like you'd expect, again, it was more humanoid. Very human-like eyes with a nose and a mouth, and it was kind of making this singing noise. At least, I say singing, but that's the only way how I know how to describe the noise it was making. I did the only thing I could think of right then. I threw my flashlight at it. It must have connected. I heard a clunk, a horrible screech, and then flapping. That's when I instinctively rolled into a ball, covered my face in my arms to protect my eyes. But it disappeared, and did not come for me, as I would think. I didn't hear it anymore. After a few minutes, I crawled back into my tent, and I couldn't leave there, as I no longer had any sort of light. I stayed awake until sunrise, and then left in a hurry. To this day, I'm not exactly sure what crazy mutation bird I saw, or what the hell it was. I am one of those people that, although I love listening and reading stories about monsters and cryptids, I never believed for one moment that I might ever actually see something myself. I am also big on talking it up, and even have a zombie apocalypse survival plan, and pretend like I would know how to fight off, or at least run and hide from most creatures you hear about. However, none of my plans involved me actually ever seeing something. And even more so, I didn't think that if I did, it would be of the winged variety. Things like this always happen when you least expect it, and, well, of course, you never really expect to see something human-sized flying through the air, and you're almost always alone, as if whatever it is somehow knows. How does it always know? I was walking back from work one evening, and that was also typical, because usually I would have driven it, but it had been a nice day, and I needed the exercise. So there I was strolling along, looking forward to a cold one, and suddenly, it goes real dark overhead, real dark and breezy, like suddenly a light wind picked up. That's when I could hear this kind of buzzing, flopping noise, but I obviously didn't think immediately, oh no, there's a flying monster. The other thing that hit me was a really bad, disgusting smell. Like, have you ever put meat in the trash, and it's rotted, and been a hot day, and then you get a whiff of it from the garbage can? It was just like that. A mix of gone old rotten meat, and, well, feces. But I was in the woods again, and my brain wanted to try and rationalize the explanation. animal feces, and maybe a dead woodchuck. I did look up at the sky, as one moment I had been enjoying the last of the evening sunshine, and the next I could barely even see. I tried to assume that maybe there had been some intense cloud coverage, with the wind picking up, or that a freak storm was on its way. Well, when I looked up into the sky, there was indeed something up there. Only it wasn't cloud coverage, it was huge. I would say it was easily as big as me, and I'm tall, big guy. I used to play college football. It looked a bit like a man from what I could tell. In fact, I can tell you what it made me think of. An angel. Not like the adorable cherubs that sit on a Christmas tree. More like a creature from the show Supernatural. A guy with wings, huge wings. Only the other difference was, and this is very important, was that it for sure had a bird's head, like an eagle, and it seemed to have something in its beak, something bloody, which I guess explained the rotting stink. It also wasn't wearing anything. It was naked, but covered in a thick, thick hair. I couldn't see for sure, but it looked as if its toes and fingers were curled up, as if it had claws on the end of the human-like limbs. So I was just standing there, gaping up at this killer man-bird thing, thinking, oh no, I had never planned to try and outrun it. Something that could fly or attack me. It didn't make any noise except for the wings, which seemed to be causing this intense breeze. It didn't make any move to kill me, in all honesty. I didn't have a clue what to do. I contemplated making a run for it. Did it even want to chase me? Whilst I instinctively knew this thing wasn't a good being. It also didn't seem in attack mode. Not yet anyway. Maybe it was just waiting for the right moment. Then we both heard another noise. A high-pitched shriek, and I thought, this is it. I'm a goner. Whatever that noise was, some sort of signal maybe. This thing seemed to answer to it, as it took one last look at me and flew off. I just stood there waiting for my heart to stop, trying to jump out of my chest. And when I was certain as I could be that it wasn't coming back, I ran home. A couple of days later, one of the neighbors knocked on the door to see if I had seen her dog who had been missing for a couple of days. I told her no, but I couldn't help think back to my sighting, and that I was pretty sure I knew what happened.